Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, nuestro panel. I wanted to now invite a very special, well, first, before we get further, I wanted to thank the group of organizations that made today possible and co-sponsored and brought many of you, starting with the Bio5 Project, the Amazon Investor Coalition, New York Community Trust, Pachamama Alliance, the Collaborative for Systemic Climate Action, and I probably forgot a few others, but I'll remember during the day. But I wanted to first, before I go into the fund and what we're looking at, set the context for where we are at. The Amazon is at a tipping point. We're COP30, the very first COP in the Amazon, and we have a very important endeavor, which is the Tropical Forest Forever Facility. Now, there are some critiques of that facility. There are others who are very hopeful. But the important thing is that Indigenous people's role in this fund is being recognized. And we have with us today the Indigenous focal point for TFFF, Manuela Cantalici, who is also a great friend and Brazilian colleague. Please come up, Manuela, and give us a little sense of the context. How does the Sacred Headwaters Fund fit into the context of the conversations today?
Thanks for being here, and thanks so much for the invitation, Atosa, Domingos. So, as Atosa was saying, at the request of the Brazilian government, a task force for indigenous peoples and local communities has been convened since the beginning of the year. As you know, TFFF has been designed at a great speed and a great pace for over like the last year and a half. And then this task force of indigenous peoples and local communities invited the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, JATC, that represents 24 countries, and to also think with us how to do this global dialogue with indigenous peoples and local communities around the world. And since then, we have also created a global steering committee of 17 organizations. And with them, we've been thinking about how can we design TFFF in a way that it can actually work with indigenous peoples and local communities in a life-affirming way. How can TFFF be different from other large financial mechanisms that have been designed in the past and only having that as a second thought? So we wanted this to be at the center of TFFF from the beginning.
We've heard that indigenous peoples are stewards of nearly half of the world's intact forests, but less than 1% or around 1% of all philanthropic and mitigation and adaptation monies get there. What's the vision for TFFF in terms of direct financing for indigenous peoples?
So far, we've managed to already secure that at least 20% of the forest payments will go directly to indigenous peoples and local communities, and the mechanism to get to them has also been designed with this Global Steering Committee, and we actually have a dual modality. There is an in-country modality, and there is a global direct finance modality. We have a governance structure at the global level, which is the Global Advisory Council of Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities that will advise the TFFF board, but we also have a governance at the national level with the National Steering Committee of Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities, and through that, Indigenous peoples and local communities, we have a chance to really think about how they want to invest this fund. So they have for the first time the autonomy to actually think about how they want to get this funds dispersed, and this is really a first. And we've been mapping the territorial funds around the world and the indigenous-led funds, and there is literally like a spring of indigenous-led funds in the world right now. They're flourishing. So we are mapping from Asia with IPASS, to in Africa, Hepaliac, and also in Latin America, especially in Brazil. We can see here there is a network of territorial funds in the Amazon, the Brazilian Amazon, with 9 different funds that they are currently managing 30 million reais together. And of course, there's Amazon Sacred Headwaters that we hope that very soon this is also going to be a reality for you guys as a fund. So there is a lot of opportunity and momentum. We want to use TFFF's momentum to also elevate the debate around direct access, how allies and philanthropy and investors can come together to actually support that finance gets to the nature stewards that know how to best use the money because they're close to the territory. So it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. And that's what TFFF really has at its heart. And I just want to say that it is imperfect. And as a friend and as an ally, we want to continue to develop trusted relationships because we really hope, and this is a mantra, that we are not going to make the same mistakes that have happened in the past. So help us map the mistakes so we won't repeat them. And also for us to have the trusted relationships for when we do make new mistakes, that we have to be fast, reiterate, and change it. Because it is an innovative path ahead of us, and we need to do it together. We need to do it. Yeah, I love the idea that the answer is us, and I do believe so, and that's why we are trying to do it in a different way.
Thank you so much, Manuela. Definitely represents hope. So 20% indigenous peoples, if the government, at least 20%, because the other 80% also supposed to go to territories that are half held by indigenous peoples. And lots of direct access mechanism and participation so that when things happen like they're happening right now in Ecuador, where the government is shutting down the bank accounts of both indigenous leaders personally and their organizational bank accounts, and if they're resisting extractivism, they're branded as funding terrorism, which is very dangerous, so that the facility is able to make direct grants to local communities and indigenous peoples, right?
Correct, my dear.
That will be a revolution. That will be a very big, important thing. So, I think I know you have to go to another panel, and I've got a few other people that I want to call on and also get to the fund. Just say a few words about what people in this room can do to elevate the role of indigenous peoples, indirect access, and the importance of investing in this fund.
My ask is that we get the information to everyone, because I do think that when we have information and people feel involved, then we can do a good job. So how can we make sure that not only the indigenous peoples and local communities who actually can come to COP are hearing about TFFF, but everywhere? Because in the beginning of this, it was just an idea. So we were really careful about not raising expectations over something that, was just an idea. But now that it is gaining traction, we just got $5.5 billion of commitments from the countries a week ago.
And where are we trying to get to? 125 billion, right?
That is correct. But during this COP, our goal was 10 billion. So we're still hopeful that we might get there during this COP. So, but I really think that the information is really important. And then each one of us, we have a special talent. We have a special skill. Some of us, we are investors, and you can invest in the junior trend, for example. Or you have an influence over a minister that in your country, perhaps you can come together and be like, what about our country? Can't we invest in TFFF? And then when the 100 billion from the private investors kicks in, also having an influence over your trust and all of that. So, but also everyone, if you have comm skills and strategy, you can think about it with us. And of course, indigenous peoples and local communities that have been left out of the conversation for such a long time. And a few times I put myself in your shoes and I'm like, wow, you're so patient. You have so much patience with us, and you give us so much. You give us a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance, but that you're really going to come together and give your ideas, your suggestions, say what are your worries, what is keeping you up at night, but also what are your hopes and your ideas so we can make this better. So yeah, that was a long answer to your question, but
we all have a role to play, so I think that is the message. Thank you so much, Manuela, for joining us today.